In the wee hours of the morning, the Senate approved the rules for President Trump's impeachment trial after a fiery marathon session. Today, the House Democratic impeachment managers will begin 3 days of their opening arguments. Joining us now is independent Senator of Maine, Angus King. Good morning, Senator.
Morning, Allison. How are you?
I'm well. I may have gotten more sleep than you. Have you gone to sleep yet?
I did. I had a few hours, but I'm ready to go.
I can see that. You look fresh as a daisy. So tell us what those 13 hours, before we get to the substance of what happened, just give us the color in the room of what those 13 hours were like. How were senators sitting still? How were they entertaining themselves? What was going on there?
Well, believe it or not, they were listening, and I sat and scanned the room pretty frequently. And I took a whole bunch of notes last night, and one of my notes was, everybody seems to be listening. As you know, the rule was no phones, no electronics, no staff, and everybody had to be in their seat. And so the first observation was people were listening. And when I saw Adam Schiff making some important points, I looked around on the Republican side. I saw a few furrowed brows. But I think that was one of the first things. Here, another thing that's sort of funny happened. The Chief Justice came in. We started the process. The Chief Justice left. There was a break. And after he left, and before the break really took hold, Mitch McConnell got his microphone and said, I think from now on we should stand when the Chief Justice enters. Mm-hmm. And that's indeed what happened. And it was actually an important moment because people were milling around during the breaks. And then all of a sudden the Chief Justice would come in, everyone would get in their chair and stand up and go silent. And it sort of set the tone for the seriousness of the evening. So those were some of the atmospheric things that I saw.
And did you, in terms of when you thought that everybody was paying attention, did you think that Idaho Senator Jim Risch was just listening with his eyes closed? Because there are sketches of him possibly napping for a few moments.
I know Jim, and I'm on the Intelligence Committee with him, and I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because I think sometimes he does just sit back and listen. And I'm not going to go there, but I've seen that phenomenon. But then, when the moment comes to ask the question, he's right there. So I'll let that one go.
Understood. Okay, let's talk about the substance. Is it fair to say, or was it your impression that yesterday Democrats, the House managers, seemed to be focused on the evidence, and the president's defense team seemed to be focused on process?
That's right. In fact, again, I mentioned I just wrote a whole lot of notes of what was going on. The president's team just kept coming back to, well, if you wanted witnesses, you should have gone to court. You should have done it in the House. You didn't give the president due process. That was really the substance. I don't think there was a single time when they contested any of the evidence or what was coming in, or really said, no, you don't need to hear from John Bolton. You don't need to hear from Mick Mulvaney. There's no need for these documents from the Pentagon because we have the evidence that exonerates the president. That never happened. And I thought the Democratic managers did a pretty smart thing. In the course of responding to these motions about witnesses and documents, they essentially made their case. They had the video clips. They had outlines on the screen of what the emails said, and they, in a sense, they got a head start on the trial through the course of these motions. And Adam Schiff demonstrated a really pretty amazing command of the facts and of the nature of the case. And his demeanor, I thought, was impressive. He was even in tone and as I say, extremely knowledgeable. But they, again, one of my notes was they're making their case now before we even start the trial.
Were you impressed by the president's defense team, Jay Sekulow and Cipollone?
Not really. I'm being honest, because they didn't make any substantive points. They kept making their point over and over about executive privilege, but they kept talking about executive privilege, but the president has never thus far invoked executive privilege. And then they talked about some kind of generalized immunity. And I thought the Democratic managers made a pretty good case coming back and saying, look, if a president who's being impeached for allegedly wrongful acts, abuse of office, can control the evidence himself or herself and say you can't talk to this or that witness, you can't look at these or those documents, then the impeachment clause really means nothing. It's essentially gone from the Constitution, and that just is not a sensible proposition. But the White House lawyers, in fact, again, one of my notes was there's a lot of high-priced legal talent there saying the same thing over and over and really not making any effort to rebut the underlying case.
Senator Mitch McConnell, in the beginning of the day, seemed to retreat on his more strict rules that he had first announced in terms of the time, in terms of whether or not evidence from the House was actually going to be submitted into the official record. What does that suggest to you? Does it suggest to you that he may change his opinion on other things?
Well, first, I thought it might be fun for your viewers. I brought the resolution with me, and I don't know if you can focus on that, but what you'll see is a bunch of interlineations down here at the bottom, handwritten language, and this is the official resolution that was voted. The only time I've seen this before was on the tax bill, where they were writing things in the middle of the night in the corner of the paper. But obviously this was a last-minute change. I think it was a good one to not make us go 2 12-hour or 4 12-hour days. That just didn't make sense for anybody, and also to take the record. But Allison, there's a larger point here, and this is what last night was really all about. This is a backwards trial. The Democratic House managers are going to argue for 24 hours about what happened. And then the White House has another 24 hours about what happened or what didn't happen. Then there's 16 hours of questioning by the senators about those presentations. And then maybe there'll be votes on witnesses. It's usually in trials I used to do up in Maine, you start with the evidence and then you have the arguments. In this case, it's completely backwards. So, for example, what happens if we get witnesses and it raises a whole host of new questions? There's nothing in the rules that calls for a new session of questions by the senators or even presentations by the House managers and the White House. So why we didn't just go ahead and say, these are important witnesses, we should hear from them, and let's get them in here and get this thing going, instead of doing it in this kind of backwards way, which I don't get.
Well, you're not alone. And perhaps you could ask Majority Leader Mitch McConnell about that thinking when you have him in the hallway. But we really appreciate you, Senator, giving us your perspective on everything that happened yesterday and what we'll be expecting today. Thank you very much for taking time on this sleepy morning, for us at least. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison.
We'll talk to you again.